All right, welcome. Here we are for working with the breath. The angle that I'm coming at this from is primarily from a meditation standpoint. And so I'm curious who here has some experience with meditation. And here's a trick I'm going to teach you from Clubhouse. If you ever feel like kind of expressing something without having to turn on your camera or even fully unmuting yourself, we can see the little red microphones. And so you can actually kind of flick that on and off. Sometimes on Clubhouse, which is an all audio app, people will use that in place of applause. So you'll see that flickering. So if I ask a question and you felt like flickering that mute signal, that would be another way that you could kind of interact without having to do those things. But if anyone would like to tell me whether or not you have any experience with meditation, I would love to hear that.
Yes, I have experience of meditation. I started meditation last year. It's a meditation that it first begins with breathing, let's say 15 breaths, all of them with the nose. I am seated with my back had a support. And then I started with some mindfulness exercises and then the proper meditation. I did a workshop about it. So it's a long meditation, let's say, well, at least for me, because it's daily, on a daily basis, twice a day when I woke up and then during the afternoon to have an extra energy for the evening.
What technique? What is this technique called?
Actually, I learned it from a workshop that is in New York. Her name is Emily Fletcher.
Okay. It's always nice to have a little bit of background in meditation when working in the breath. We're working with the breath. I think Kathy had unmuted for a moment.
I did, but I don't have anything like amazing to share. I was gonna say, the only experience with meditation was that I like the being, like just being aware of your thoughts and your feelings, like, and not being latched onto them, just like these are things, but they don't have to be me or whatever. But the whole like, I'm going to sit here for like X number of minutes and like have a quiet mind. Oh my gosh. It's like having a heart attack. I don't even know how people do it. It's incredible. So yeah, I'm interested to learn all the good stuff, because
that's actually one of the biggest misconceptions about meditation is people think that they should be turning off their thoughts and they should have a quiet mind. And that derails people left and right, because that's a really big misunderstanding. And it's more like that's what you aspire to than what you should expect to experience. So that's kind of the difference there. And so then people can feel like they're failing when they're not.
Yeah.
For me, I've done a lot of techniques and I've taught a lot of techniques. And part of what I'm bringing to this today is it comes from Vipassana. People pronounce it differently. And with that technique, you start with paying attention to the breath. So we're going to do a little bit of that. And the hardest part of what we're going to do right now is to just observe our breath without changing our breath. So we're really just going to spend a couple of minutes trying to see what our breath is doing without manipulating it. And so I'm saying that's so hard. It's such a simple thing, but anytime you start to pay attention to your breath, you feel inclined to kind of, maybe either breathe more deeply or breathe more slowly or whatever it is. And so what can be really hard about this is to try to genuinely just observe how you're breathing. And so I'm going to set a little timer for myself for 2 minutes, and then I'll let you all know. And so just try and, sit comfortably. You might want to close your eyes. You might want to gently let them just relax and maybe not close them all the way. It's completely up to you. But as you're doing this, and as you're observing how your breath is as much as you can without manipulating it, pay attention to where you're feeling your breath. You might be feeling maybe like a sensation under your nose as if you're breathing in and out of your nose. You might feel it in the back of your throat. You might feel it somewhere else in your body. And so then when we come back, let's talk a little bit about what you're experiencing, and then we can use that to build on. So let's go ahead and do 2 minutes of this. Okay. Okay. So there was our 2 minutes. So I'll go ahead and start with my experience. So what I was feeling was that my breath felt really constrained to just this chest region, this upper chest region. And that's a really common pattern when you're feeling stressed out, is to just be breathing up in the top part of your lungs and not doing belly breathing. And I was breathing through my nose. And so I was feeling that I'm pretty congested. And so with that kind of constrained breathing, when it's just in your chest, that also limits how much air you have available. So if I were to be reading and recording myself right now, I would be having to take breaths more often because of that, that limited oxygen that I'm creating with that constrained breath. So does anyone else feel like sharing what you were experiencing?
Pause for a second. Go ahead, Bob.
I mostly agree with you, but my main feeling was I'm not getting enough exchange of air, and that it's sort of locked in my pharynx and can't get anywhere where I need it.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation.
I noticed that Marielle put something in the chat, but it disappeared. So I don't know. Just wanted to bring it up.
Oh, so I'm seeing on the meditation technique that I learned, they say that you are trying to stop your mind. Oh, trying to stop your mind is like trying to stop your heart. You can't learn how, you can't stop, but you can learn how to address it. And I would say that that's really accurate. Basically, our brain is designed to be thinking. And so we're kind of fighting against its nature when we try and tell it to stop it. So, and we can talk a little bit more about like the details of what's sometimes called the monkey mind. Alex, did you have anything to share about your observation?
Yeah, I noticed I was breathing kind of shallow, and probably because it's a work day and stress and all that, but it was good to notice that. And yeah, I felt it in my sinuses and lungs and throat and even in my back a little bit, maybe from the lungs. So it's I've never paid attention to that. So it was really interesting.
Thank you. Okay. And I'm hoping some other people might feel comfortable enough to share. And I'll give a little bit of window for people to speak up, but I also don't want you to feel cornered into sharing. So I'll be quiet for a moment to give you a chance.
I'll share, but it's not like, I guess I could just feel it in the back of my throat a lot and back of my lungs. But it felt fine. I don't know. Like I didn't feel like it was lacking or anything. Like, so that was good. That's all.
Did you feel like it was deep enough? It sounds like you felt like it was deep enough.
I think so. Like, I mean, maybe I've never breathed deep enough, so I don't have anything to compare it to, but it felt okay.
Right. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll give just a little bit more time in case someone else wants to, and then I'll continue if not. Okay, no one's jumping up. So let's continue. One of the things that's really interesting about observing your breath, and I think I was saying this as we led into it, I used to really just dislike breath meditations. They irritated me. And I would get very impatient with them. And then once I started doing this technique where you're just really observing the breath rather than trying to count or anything like that, then it grew on me. And now I like a whole bunch of different breath techniques. But the thing that's really interesting about the breath is it's essentially an early warning system. And so if you're experiencing something, like let's say something made you angry or something made you anxious, it's going to show up in your breath before it's going to show up anywhere else. And so it often shows up in our breath before we register what's going on in our minds. So that can be something that's really interesting to condition yourself to paying attention to so that you have that tool of self-awareness. So with observing your breath, just like anything, the more you practice something, the more you start to notice nuanced details that you didn't notice before. But most of us, especially in Western cultures, are not doing a lot of belly breathing. And so let's take just a moment to kind of sit and experience. And that's one of the benefits, like Kathy had mentioned about standing up when you're doing your recording. versus sitting down. So when you're sitting down, you are compressing your lungs a little bit, especially when you have a little padding like I have. So, so just take a moment and try and do a little bit of belly breathing. So if you're breathing up higher, just really deliberately try and focus on allowing your abdomen to expand. Did someone say something? Okay. So let's just take a few minutes. We're not going to do this as formally as the last one. Just kind of try and experience some belly breathing. And you can breathe through your nose or your mouth, whatever's comfortable. So again, I would like to hear any observations people are willing to share, and I'll start. So for me, I felt my body resisting belly breathing in the beginning. It was like, no, 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 we're feeling a little bit of stress right now. We're going to stay up with the shallow chest breathing. Thank you very much. And so I kind of had to coax it a little bit to do a little bit of belly breathing. And so that's one of the reasons why we're talking about this in this workshop, because when you go to read, you know, you've got all the activities in your life, all the distractions, all the stress in your life coming with you as you sit down. And if you're breathing up in your upper chest, then you're going to have a harder time doing your reading without starting to feel out of breath. And so using some practices where you kind of dial in and pay attention to your breath and maybe deliberately do a little bit of belly breathing, that can help you get to a place where you can work more effectively with your breath. So what did other people experience with doing some belly breathing?
I am noticing that if I change my posture, my belly breathing is improving. So I notice if I sit on the edge of the chair with just my, may I say buttocks? It's okay?
Yes.
Great. So if my buttocks are on the edge of the chair, so I have some paddings here too, and I put my, also if I put my back straight, but my chin is more oriented on my chest, so I can stretch my neck, my belly breathing is more flexible. Otherwise, I will feel my breathing here on the chest.
Yeah, and what you're describing is really, you know, essentially good meditation posture. I don't know if you all have had enough experience to see how sometimes meditators will be sitting cross-legged, but they'll be sitting on a cushion that creates a little bit of an angle. And typically it's really the very back, like your sits bone. So the bones that are usually the rigid part of where you're making contact with wherever you're sitting, having just those on the edge so that your pelvis is tilted just a little bit, creating a really good posture with the spine. And then similarly, making sure that you've got your head in a good position, because it helps open those airways up for being able to breathe. And so your posture is definitely something worth paying attention to when you're reading. Does anyone else have any observations they're willing to share?
Well, I find I have sleep apnea and use one of those onerous machines. And I find actually I've been fighting belly breathing, and somehow I fall asleep and I get to do it. And now voluntarily breathing deeply feels pretty damn good.
Interesting. Why do you think that you find yourself fighting belly breathing?
Because I hate the machine.
Oh, okay. So it's when you're using the machine that you're fighting it.
Right.
Oh,
And that's
interesting.
generally 6 to 8 hours a night.
Yeah, those machines can be a whole lot of fun. Yeah, I know a lot of people who use those, and if the fit isn't right, that's really going to mess everything up. But even just using them at all, especially if you have an older model that's pretty loud, just there are a lot of reasons to kind of feel like you're not trying to sleep with a friend there. Almost like you have an opponent in the room with you. So yeah, I
Exactly.
hear you. That's a struggle. Do you practice, this is a little bit off topic, but it seems like being well rested is reasonably relevant. Do you practice any sleep hygiene, like maybe doing a body scan, relaxation, progressive relaxation before you try to go to sleep?
Yeah, I do that. I am also delightfully suffering from back pain,
Oh,
and so I consciously relax and consciously do exercises for
yeah.
about 20 minutes before I go to bed.
Well, I hope that's helping you. I'm really glad to hear that you're doing that.
Yeah, it does help.
Good.
Being younger would help a little more.
No. I remember being in high school and one of my history teachers said something about age, and he absolutely wouldn't go back to being a teenager. And I remember being shocked because in our culture, we act like being youthful is the ideal. And I was so shocked that he said that. Then he elaborated a little bit and he said if he could go back to having his teenage body while still having all the wisdom he's gained, then he would go for that. And that makes so much sense to me. More every year.
Actually, from my vast experience in getting old, I found 45 to 50 is probably the best.
Good to know. Okay.
If you ever get there, note that. Yeah.
I'm in my mid 50s, so I guess I passed those. Would anyone else like to share what they experienced with belly breathing?
I'll go.
Terrific.
Yeah, I noticed like psychologically, it immediately like slowed my brain down. 'Cause my brain was like, oh my God, 6,000 million things. And I'm like, okay, be present. So it did help me with that. I felt like I was getting more oxygen and more present. And as Marielle was saying, it forced me to adjust my posture. And I realized I was kind of slouching and it felt good.
Nice. Well, terrific. There is a book I want to recommend. I'm going to go and make sure that I don't get the name wrong. I'm pretty sure it's just called Breathing. Let's see here. Oh, the page I had it on, it has gone away. Okay, so it's called Breathing. It's got a yellow cover. Actually, my dentist before I moved back here was obsessed, and he had it in every exam room. So the author's name is James Nestor, Nestor. So again, it's called Breathing. He's very much a proponent of breathing through the nose. So that's something that's interesting because like I said, sometimes people will struggle because maybe, like a deviated septum, any kind of nose injuries in the past, if you tend to be congested, I tend to be congested. And so that can be hard, especially if you're living in a dry place, which all of us in Colorado are. One thing that has helped me a lot over the years is using a neti pot. And I had to watch Oprah doing it on a video over and over before I got brave enough to pour water through my sinuses because it seemed unwise. But it turns out it's really helpful. Humidifiers, there are other things that you can do that can help your sinuses. But there are a lot of things structurally that help you if you're able to kind of condition yourself to breathe through the nose. Like my husband, he has a CPAP as well, and he has one of the ones that attaches just to his nose. And they actually had him use an elastic strap in the beginning to condition him to sleep with his mouth closed. So one of the benefits when you can breathe through your nose is that we have a built-in humidifier when we're able to breathe through our noses. And so when we're breathing through our mouths, when we are trying to read, we're going to be getting more dehydrated. And so then that can affect your reading. It can affect a lot of things as you're going along, as you're feeling more and more dehydrated. It can be a distraction. So conditioning yourself as much as you can to breathe through your nose can be really helpful. And so that book is a whole book on all of the benefits of breathing through your nose, and almost seems like a whole big sales pitch on how everyone should be doing that. So let's come back a little bit to kind of the meditation aspect of what we're talking about today. So another benefit of some of these things that we've been doing are getting you to feel a little bit more centered and grounded before you start doing your readings. Because just like Alex was saying, like you come into something and you've got like the 6 million things on your mind. And so that's going to make it a lot easier for you to get in the flow of your reading if you just take that short little window to get yourself centered and grounded. So I'm a big fan of using whatever makes me feel more grounded. Like for me, it's how I stay sane and civilized. And then I'm trying to think how to word this. When you take that extra time to feel grounded, then it also gives you the ability to kind of be more on top of all of the things that you're trying to do when you're reading. So for example, as people work on their breath and working with what they're reading, you might find that it really benefits you to have everything positioned so that you can maybe pause after every paragraph and just take a moment to catch your breath again, maybe take a sip of something, and having a cadence to the way that you're reading, maybe even making it a little bit of a ritual that also helps you feel more grounded. That can be something that can make it feel like you're not just doing this thing for other people, that you maybe benefit from it as well, because you've got that extra grounding as part of your ritual. And so I'd like to pause for a moment and invite other people to share some of the things that they've been doing when they've been reading that have been beneficial, anything that helps you with your breath, anything that's maybe a ritual that helps you feel more grounded around reading. So I would love to hear anything that you guys are willing to share on this, because I know
Real
you all
quick.
have some great tips. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Real quick, there's just a couple things from the chat. I hope
Oh,
that I
yeah,
wrote
great.
the name of the book and the author properly in there if anyone
Yes.
wants to reference that. And then Doug Crane says, I use NeilMed sinus rinse every morning. It's great for anyone prone to sinus infections like me.
Yeah, those are really similar to a neti pot. So those are something, I think you can find them at like Walgreens and all the, all the drugstores. I think they have things like that. They're nice because do yours, Doug, have saline or salt packets? I think those have salt packets.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they tell you to use distilled water, but I have to say I just use warmed up tap water and it seems to be
Yeah.
okay. I guess if you're in an area where the water isn't great, then yeah, you definitely want to use distilled water. But yeah, I used to get 3 or 4 sinus infections a year and I rarely get one anymore. Although I had one over the past few weeks. It was kind of a combination cold sinus thing going on.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah,
And,
I agree with you.
So
Go ahead. I think it could
yeah,
go.
and I guess in terms of I'm a trombonist, so this whole breathing through the nose thing, it just don't work for me at all. You've got to really breathe through the mouth. And also in terms of taking breaks and things, I try to make sure when I do want to take a break that I avoid taking a breath before I hit the stop button on the record thing. So I try to minimize all the breathing sounds as much as I can. So, yep.
Yeah. And depending on which version of Audacity, I think there's a little bit of variation in this. Alex knows more about this than I do, but with some editions, you can just hit the space bar to pause and then hit it again to go. And so if yours works with that, then that can be a really handy tip for when you do want to pause and take a sip, catch your breath, whatever it is. And so, yeah, so play around and see if that works with your version, because that can be a little bit easier than orienting the arrow to click right on that button. And pause is better than stop, because then you're just going to keep the same track going. Alex, what do you have to share about that?
Yeah, pretty much exactly what you said. I like the pause key just because it's a little easier to aim. So like when I'm reading and recording, if you're using a mouse, you have to like take a second and find the pause button, and then you're capturing all that weird dead sound. Whereas if you just I just like rest my hand gently on the pause key and just hit it, it just feels a lot easier to me and minimizes that weird dead air.
Yeah. And then did anyone else have any tips? Like I think Marielle has some experience that could be useful for people.
Yes, actually, I was about to suggest water. I almost drink half gallon at least while I am recording. So when I do, let's say 2 paragraphs, I always drinking a sip of water. I know it's a lot of water, but it's used for me. It's like for me, it's my grounding technique, strategy, let's say. So I always have the water, but I also have my cup of tea. This is my cup of tea. And also I take, like, when I am finishing an article, I take a deep breath before editing, and I do something like can distract me because it's another moment of the recording. moment. So you are recording and then editing, taking some pauses, so you can keep fresh after before the next article.
Yeah, that sounds great. And then I think Air Force Kathy had possibly some advice. Like she's the one who brought up standing up rather than sitting down.
Sure. So what I typically do for the articles is I go through the paper and I save them as PDFs. And then I open up the PDFs each individually. Each article is an individual PDF. So I can kind of cross them off as I finish them. But I take a pen, I ended up using one of those Microsoft pens, and I mark up the PDF on, and you can put where you want to breathe, maybe, I don't know, maybe put a B or some slashes, what might be a good spot on where to stop and pause and breathe. But I did also want to address your question of how do we get grounded? And for me, I think it's taking those deep breaths, obviously, but before reading, to say, why am I reading this? What is my purpose in doing this? I do this as a ministry for others. I am serving others by reading for them that cannot, I am reading for them essentially. So
Yeah.
I like to, that for me is a grounding piece.
I really like that. And I think that's a great idea as people sit down to do this, because if you picture someone who isn't able, because of visual or text impairment, to read this for themselves and to really imagine, I'm a person who likes to kind of create, if I don't have a specific person that I know that I can put in this position, then maybe kind of inventing a person, but inventing a whole person, not just kind of a vague, yes, there are people out there who can't read this content like I can, but trying to be really specific and imagining that I'm reading to that person, because for me, that makes it much more personal, and it feels, I don't know, it feels nice. It feels nice when you really feel like you're connecting to someone out there, because there is that weird disconnect for you as readers, that you put in this work and you upload it into the portal, and because you don't get that direct one-on-one feedback from the people you're helping, it's hard to realize that you're probably affecting hundreds of people every time you create a recording, if not more. So I think it's really powerful to kind of bring you back to that place and remember how important this work is and how much help you're providing to people. Yeah, that's really powerful stuff. Does anyone else have anything that they could share for tips?
I have a little thing. Oh, sorry. Yes, go ahead, please.
Oh, I was going to say, silly as it sounds, I find if my cat doesn't get bored, I'm doing a better job.
The cat is very judgmental.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty funny. I like it. Marielle, what did you have?
Yes, sometimes when you are, for example, you are getting tired, you know that you are not, you are making so many mistakes. A little trick to keep your mind focused on the article is doing just a little lip thrill, like, and that's it. And you keep recording. So I made a mistake. I am trying to read something like, I don't know, sleeping, bodies, can't, okay, erase it. Body scan, chest, stress, belly, relax, and keep going with that little lip trill. Like it relaxes your lips, your tongue, your throat.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I also think that getting yourself in that grounded place before you start reading, where you're more centered, that a volunteer just finished reading in the studio. He's heading out. When you get to that centered place, then it's easier to read without making mistakes, because all of those other things weighing on your mind makes it a lot harder for you to focus on the content that you're reading. So I think that that's such a great tool to kind of bring you back to a place where you're focused, and I think it's a little energy boost when you do that. Yeah, I really like that a lot. So I feel like someone else out there has something valuable, and I don't want to move on without giving everyone a chance to share.
I'll share. When I started as a volunteer too, and now that I work here, I have access to all the archives and everything. So I was listening to my old recordings from days where I like got like 2 hours of sleep versus like 8 hours of sleep. And it's a huge difference. So I know this is asking a lot, but getting good rest, I think, makes a huge difference in your voice. Because yeah, you can just tell I just sounded so tired and boring and blah. And then days where I got good sleep, I'm announcing things better, pronouncing things better, and just more energetic and lively. So it does make a big difference.
I love that. Yeah. And I mean, it's just good for your wellness in general, right? So it's just another reason to encourage yourself to get proper rest and to take care of yourself across the board, because the better you're taking care of yourself, the better you can show up for your volunteer work as well. I wanted to return a little bit to the idea of belly breathing. And if that's something that you're not used to doing as part of just how you exist, because some people, like they've conditioned themselves that they're just good at belly breathing. And I'll have periods in my life when I'm good at it, but obviously from my description today, not always. So perhaps there are some ways that you can remind yourselves. I'm a person who enjoys putting Post-it notes all over the house to remind myself to do things. So maybe when I'm in the bathroom brushing my teeth, I have this reminder on the mirror, and I go down to the kitchen and I'm making something to eat and I have a reminder on the cabinet. So whatever it is that might work for you to help your body remember to do belly breathing, because the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. And we all have moments of stress where we kind of drift away from it. And maybe we need to work our way back to it, which is definitely my case. But yeah, so does anyone have any tips that have worked for them to kind of build a new habit?
I'm sorry, me again. Sorry,
No,
guys.
I love hearing from you.
Okay. I just a quick breathing technique, like insists in breathing for
Yeah.
4 seconds, then hold it for 4 seconds, and then exhale for 4 seconds.
Yeah.
And it starts to connect, and you are starting to connect with the belly breathing. You can do the breakfast, for example, during mornings.
I really like that. And as everyone who's participating, oh, Kathy, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I have heard that technique as well, and I've heard it referenced as box breathing. And so, you know, if you can imagine a box being drawn, and so 4 seconds, 4 seconds, 4, and so to complete the box in the breathing. So just put a name to that technique.
Yeah. So has anyone here heard of habit stacking? I love the idea of habit stacking. I find it to be very useful. So when you are trying to have a new habit, when you're trying to incorporate something new, what works best is, rather than just kind of having this vague, like, I want to do the new thing, to actually attach it to a pre-existing habit. So then you're stacking it onto something you're already doing. So for any of these things, for example, that we're talking about doing around recording, that perhaps you might want to think about, like, let's use box breathing, that maybe you wanted to take a minute to do box breathing before you start recording. So what is the first thing that you do when you sit down to record? So whatever that is, you know, perhaps it's making sure you've got your beverage, or maybe it's making sure that you can open up the publication that you're reading. Whatever it is, that's your first thing, that maybe attaching the box breathing to that, so that you do it the same way each time, because that will make it a lot easier to remember it. That maybe you grab your coffee and you sit down and you do the box breathing, and that is now your ritual. And if you feel like having more than one thing that you're trying, like, I probably wouldn't try to add more than 2 or 3 things when you're doing the habit stacking, that you can add more things over time. So don't make it too complicated so that it's hard. But try and come up with some way in the beginning. Again, like, Post-its are great. If you have a note on your computer, something to remind you. And once you've done that, the brain, I think, takes about, there's different research on different things, but a lot of the things that I've seen that really talk about getting good at something is about 28 days. And so if you can remember to be pretty consistent with something for 28 days, then you're going to be able to do it in a much more natural manner. So for most of you, you're recording a program 1 time a week. So maybe it would work really well just in terms of your life in general, to think about doing it every day for 28 days. If there's something that you do every morning, maybe right after you brush your teeth, that you want to spend 1 minute doing box breathing, or you want to do 1 minute of whatever is a grounding technique for you. If you just wanted to focus on belly breathing, whatever is right for you, and trying to attach that to your pre-existing habits so that you're doing it for 28 days, then that gives your brain enough time to form a new neural pathway that helps support that new behavior. And there is another one, just thinking of the, and I want to do this together for a moment. It's, it actually feels kind of awkward with your hands when you're new to it, but it's breathing through your nose. And what you do is you're going to cover one side, and you don't have to aggressively cover it. You just have to gently cover your nose. See, Alex, and you can do it with just one hand. A lot of times the yogis will do it where you press on one side with your thumb and the other side with your ring finger. So you hear me get all sinusy as I'm doing this. Yeah, so what you do is, as you breathe in, you're going to be holding it on one side, and then you'll hold your breath for just a moment as you switch which side. Then you'll exhale out the other side. Then you'll breathe in, same side. And again, you'll hold it just long enough to switch fingers. And then you'll do the breathe out and breathe in cycle again. So let's spend maybe 2 minutes trying that. For some people, you might find it really relaxing. For some people, you might not. So we're doing a little bit of sampling of techniques so you can keep the ones that you like and discard the ones that you don't. So let's go ahead and do 2 minutes of that. There we go. All right. Does anyone have any thoughts about that technique? This can be one that people love and one that people don't.
I thought it was great. I noticed the longer I did it, I felt like my breaths were getting longer in time, like I could take more breath in, and I didn't even really change my posture that much. It was almost like the resistance factor was lessening as I was breathing. I found it to be a very nice tactile way of doing breathing. I've never thought of that, of the touching. So that was also neat because it's a way to focus on the breath because you're also focusing on touching your face with your fingers.
Yeah, it kind of helps you stay focused on what you're doing with that meditation
Yes.
because of that movement. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The monkey mind doesn't get carried away so much.
So true.
Alex, I think you're going to say something.
Oh yeah, that was my main observation too. Because I have a hard time with the box breathing because I like just lose focus. But with this, something about the physical part definitely helped me stay focused. So I like that. I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, that's a common from the Ayurvedic traditions type of a thing. Some of the Buddhist traditions will use it as well. Yeah. So as Kathy was saying about seeming like her breaths got longer, your breath does as your central nervous system, essentially as you calm down from meditation, even short bits of meditation, then your breathing does get deeper. But another really neat thing about it, which is why I wanted to bring meditation into this conversation, is that your oxygen metabolism also slows down when you're calmer, which means that each breath that you take gets you further. And so that's another really great reason to use some of these techniques around reading, so that your breath is getting you further, getting you further down the paragraph before you need another breath. So we're getting about to time to let you guys go. Does anyone have any questions or anything? I know I've mentioned monkey mind a couple times. I want to explain that really quick. In a lot of Eastern traditions that use meditation, that whole tendency of the mind to go and wander, so that you might be trying to focus on something in your meditation, and all of a sudden you notice you're thinking about your grocery list, and then you bring your focus back, then all of a sudden you're thinking about what kind of chocolate you want, and then you bring your focus back. So that's the monkey mind, is that it just keeps swinging from tree to tree. So when I'm mentioning the monkey mind, it's just talking about how our brain is going to go off on these random tangents, and it's normal. So, okay, back to what I was saying. Does anyone have any questions or comments as we go ahead and wrap up?
I do. So with the nose breathing, like I like the exercise we just did. That was really nice, and it was way easier to stay focused. But in terms of when you're actually reading, do you find that you use the nose breathing while you're reading? Because like I said, when I tried it, it was like talk, 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 this big like nasal inhale that was really like not awesome. So do you feel like it's more of a get yourself like full of air and calm and centered and then talk and read normally, or do you try to use it while you're actually reading?
For me, anatomically, I have a lot of trouble consistently breathing through my nose because I get very congested.
Mhm.
And so you might be similar. And so when I can, I do breathe through my nose, but that's not always. And so I always make sure that I have a lot of fluids next to me, because when I do have to breathe through my mouth, I'm going to get that much more dehydrated. And so that's also why it's really nice to be able to have that pause button, being able to use the space bar, so that you can make sure that you've gotten enough good breaths and you can go ahead and have a sip and then get back to reading. So for me, being able to pause is really important.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah, when you can, I mean, that's ideal. When your body works with you to breathe through your nose, it's ideal. But anatomically, we're not all built the same. Okay. Let's see, I'll give people one more second or so to ask any questions or share anything they want to share. Okay. I think we're good. I really appreciate you coming today, and I hope there was something that was useful in this for you. Thank you for bringing print to life. We really appreciate our volunteers. And the training that we're going to have next month is coming from Alex. Do you feel like speaking about that?
Sure.
Oh, you
yeah,
have your
I
hand
can.
up too.
Oh, I was just clapping.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought this was awesome, and you did a wonderful job, Lauren. And yeah, breathing is so important for your reading and for life and well-being and everything. So it all interconnects. Yeah, so I forget the exact date of mine, but I'm doing a lunch and learn about bias. And I don't know if you guys have noticed in the papers you read, you probably sense some bias here and there. So I'm going to talk about that, but then also bias in the voiceover. So there's kind of two different parts of it. And I'm just going to talk about how it is and what our role is in society. And it'll be a cool little conversation. So I invite you all to RSVP to that. And I think it'll be really interesting to talk about. So yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. And hopefully we'll see you next month. And Later today, we'll have this video up. So if anybody felt like revisiting any part of it, we'll send out the link when we've got that up. And thank you again. I appreciate you all.
Thank you. I think it was really helpful information.
Oh, thank you. That's really good to hear. I appreciate it. Okay.
So great to see you all. Bye. Mary
Bye.
also
Thank
thank you so
you.
much in the comments.
Oh, thank you. Okay, bye-bye.